Hello and welcome to the Last Mixtape Podcast. My name is Stephen White, and on this week's show, we discuss the potential pitfalls of hype, view the brand new debut album from Julie Dawson, Bottom of the Pool, and discuss the latest music from the week that was. But first, don't believe the hype. The words of Alex Turner at the beginning of Arctic Monkeys' debut single, I Bet That You Look Good on the Dance Floor. Why am I quoting a song from almost 20 years ago? Well, dear listener and dear viewer through the means of YouTube, I wanted to talk to you this week a little about hype and something that's been kind of rolling around in my head about the idea of hype through the media and through specifically the music industry. But of course, this can apply to all arts fields. So I was kind of thinking on the idea of hype, reasoning why, because at a fairly recent, and I don't want to use names or anything like that, I don't want to claim that anybody's just hype, I don't want to claim anybody's hyping anybody up in that way. I think we can talk in terms of the effects of what it does. So recently enough, I was at an event in which an artist who had been quite hyped, they weren't in a performing role, they were in a different role, but they were on the bill, and they were a very hyped artist at one point, and in a lot of ways, rightfully so, but hype had moved on. And they had moved on to other artists, and the hype had seemingly moved away from them, at least for the time being. And it was interesting to see that reaction in that artist in that sphere, in a room of people that had hyped them, in an industry that had hyped them, still looking for some sort of purchase and still looking for the same reactions they got when they initially were hyped. And it made me think about, is hype damaging? Is the idea of hype damaging? Now, sometimes hype can be well earned, and a few times on this very podcast, we have talked about bands that have come into an album or to a release with an incredible amount of hype and delivered on it. In these recent weeks, we've talked about bands like Lankum and Fontaines and Kneecap, and all of these bands all have had, in the build-up to their releases and in their very early careers, quite a deal of hype about them. And it's been well earned. And I think it's important to see the difference between really great PR, hype that is just people being excited about a band, and sometimes hyperbole. It's interesting to look at why that happens and why and what are the effects of it. Sometimes I truly believe, a lot of the time, media, people like myself, and I'm to blame for it too, I've definitely hyped up bands in my own way, definitely more in the past. I try my best now not to do that anymore, because I feel as if it doesn't really matter. Two, it's not really incumbent on me. I don't want to tell you, the viewer, or you, the listener, what you should get excited about. I want to talk to you about music that I like, but I'm not going to tell you if it's going to be the next big thing or it's going to be exciting or all of these type of things. I'd rather leave that in the past, but I have been a purveyor of hype in the past. But I've also been somebody who's gone to gigs of hyped bands and gone, and I'm sure we've all had that experience. There's a lot of hype in the media, there's a lot of hype in the press about a band, you're excited to go see them or listen to the song or listen to the album, and you kind of go, what? And I think that reaction is kind of, it's natural. You can't like everything, and not everything that's hyped is going to be something that you like. But I think sometimes the reason being, and especially in my sphere of things, is almost kind of wanting to be the first, to be the Dave Fanning to that band's U2 or such. Be the one that was pushing them at the very beginning so that later on in the career, the big band will remember the journalist or the radio DJ or whoever that said the great things about them or really was the one that found them or all that kind of stuff. And that's a natural reaction, I think, to be perfectly honest. Where I think it can be damaging is in a couple of ways. When you overhype a band or an artist or anyone like that, you are flooding the market as such. You are putting so much out there about this one act that other acts fail to be heard in the same kind of sphere. And certain times, acts that may, I don't want to say more deserving, but that are deserving of more attention at the very least, are kind of pushed to the side, especially in a small music industry. I've said in the past, and I don't take anything back for saying it, here in Ireland, and if you're from another music scene, it might be true of your own too, that we do have a kind of like kids chasing a football around a field mentality to the things that we like sometimes in the Irish music scene. We pick one thing, we all chase after that one thing, and then everything else gets left behind, and it's seemingly we can't hold very many genres in these kind of type things. So we're more susceptible to the waves of hype and the waves of trends at times due to that. That kind of mentality is damaging in that way, because there can be really cool things happening on periphery, but if you're not where the ball is and you're where the ball is going to be, you can be too ahead of the time, or you can be too ahead of the curve, or you can be too different where you're not being listened to. For the band itself that is being hyped, that can also be damaging. We are all of us with ego. None of us are without it. Me, I have one, you have one, bands have one, artists have one. And if we are all hyped up to the nth degree and told that we're the greatest thing ever, and we're on the TV and we're on all of these types of things, and oh my God, you're the second coming of the Beatles, or you're whoever, that is going to affect you. And the more you're told that, and the more you're told that, the more you'll believe it. And the more that you believe it, the more you go, okay, I'm great. But the problem is, as I say with that kind of analogy about all the kids chasing a football on a football field, when the ball moves, all the kids will move with it. And you're left as a band standing there because you are no longer the shiny new thing. You are just another thing. But the trend has moved on, the interest has moved on, or at least that amount of interest has moved on. What happens to the person when that ego that has been inflated, and it can happen to any of us, is left to simply just fall? What happens to that band? What happens to that group? All of a sudden, you're not on all the things. You're not on all the lineups. You're not on the tip of everybody's tongue. The new release isn't catching fire in the same way the last release did. And nothing has changed. You've not changed. But things have changed without you. That can also be damaging to the artist too, that it happens to. Now, it can be advantageous. There is no doubt about that. It can be incredibly helpful for an artist to have that media attention because you're getting more ears on it. But if the media attention is disproportionate, maybe to your output, maybe to the amount of output that you have, maybe you need more time to grow as an artist, and maybe you hit something too early on, that can be incredibly damaging. And you can see a lot of bands, and I know from my time watching, a lot of bands just kind of, I know for disparate reasons, but sometimes just fall by the wayside because of it, because the momentum has gone. And maybe they had more to offer in the long run, but in the short-term period of what hype provides, it doesn't help. The idea of the emperor has no clothes is not one that we've all experienced ourselves, no matter what music scene you've been to. We've definitely seen bands that have been hyped artificially, and maybe those ones aren't because of the kind of well-meaning radio DJs and journalists and bloggers and vloggers and all of these types of people who just love music and want to share a cool new band and are kind of hoping that they'll be the first to kind of catch this one on the rise up. But sometimes it can be artificial. Sometimes people know people, don't they? And because of that, the hype, once again, is disproportionate. But once you pull away from it, once you pull back, you still have to have the music. And sometimes that just doesn't work. And then the band or an artist that is not without hype, or is without hype rather, has a cool new song and people cling on to that and they move ahead of the hyped band. So it's almost like a game of musical chairs in a lot of ways. But the reason I've been musing on it, and it's been stuck in my head for such a long time, is that incident. And again, I don't want to use anybody's name. I don't want to do anything like that because it's a tough thing and no artist deserves that, I don't think. And again, this is kind of me. I've been doing the last mixtape in many guises now for about 10 years, over 10 years. And I've hyped bands and I've all these kind of type things. But I think it's important to kind of realize that. And it's important to kind of see that there is a damage to that. It can be a damage to the scene as a whole because you are pushing things artificially, or you're pushing things out that maybe aren't deserving of it, or maybe aren't ready yet, or maybe other things. So you have this kind of bottleneck in the music scene where kind of things are being pushed ahead of other things only because of where the hype is. And the hype can be a genre, the hype can be anything. And you can also damage the individual. You can damage the artist because of it. You cannot let them grow organically. It's almost like the tree in the wood. And I've said this before about music, the music industry. The old music industry that we had was one where it was built mainly out of like radio and television and getting on TV and getting on the radio and getting on the charts. That's how you did it. And get a record label, all these kind of things. There were steps and there were choke points and bottlenecks in which artists and bands could go to, and glass ceilings of all types. And the new music industry, which comes out of the ashes of the old one, is almost like a new seedling in the forest, but lying underneath the bough of the old tree, and it's going to have to contort and twist itself to the light. And sometimes that contortion can lead to its own bottlenecks. the Spotify model, or the streaming model, or the model in which we listen to music, consume music at this moment in time, and TikTok can be a version of that, and there'll always be something new and a new way for music to get into people's ears, has in ways kind of created the long tail theory, where you don't necessarily need just an immediate jump and all of a sudden everything's happened and you're a new artist and all that. Like, some artists have been around for years and then get the pull and then get the song that hits people. I know Chappell Roan is an example of that. And this summer, who's been an artist, been working for years, then all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but one of her songs catches fire and she's able to move on that, and is already an artist who has found their voice and found their style artistically and musically, and they're able to capitalize that. But the idea of like the sudden, you got to do it within the first 6 months, or it doesn't happen at all, or you got to hit it where the iron is hot, doesn't really apply anymore. So why do we do it? Why do we then hype up bands? Why do we then push out bands? Why do we want... I think we're still kind of in that old school mentality. We're still in that old kind of showbiz kind of way. And I think that kind of leads to this kind of cluttering or noise within a scene when you do it. It sounds kind of strange to say it, but by pushing one band, it kind of overarches and takes over. And it's almost the canopy and the analogy of the trees, that it's not leaving light to hit the surface. And lots of cool bands and artists won't get that same attention, because there's only so many minutes, there's only so much column inches, there's only so much listening people can do, but that's the way things go. So it's something that I think there's no easy answer for, because it's always going to happen. And I'm definitely not coming to you in a place of, well, I have grown beyond all of this. I love talking about bands, and there's bands that I get excited about and all that kind of cool thing. But I suppose what I'm wondering is, you as the listener or the viewer, you may be an artist yourself who has been in a hyped band or a hype artist or whatever, and you've seen that undulation, or you're just somebody who's noticed it yourself. And I don't mean in, my band should have been ahead of this band and this band was too hyped. Not interested in any of that. What I'm talking about is the idea of pushing individuals, pushing artists to a degree in which they're put out there and then just left fall when the interest moves to another way. And what happens to those people, and what happens as a consequence of all of that. Don't believe the hype. The quote from the Arctic Monkeys thing is an important thing, because you can see bands who didn't. You can see bands that were wary of it. You can see bands, rightfully so, feel a little bit like, oh, I don't think I want to be involved in that. I said, and I think I can talk about this. Yeah, I can talk about this because I fucking said it. It's my words. Fucking people don't owe me. I was part of a judging panel many years ago for the Choice Prize, and we were talking about Just Mustard's album. And I said one of my favorite things about the album was, and about the band was, they didn't seem to give a fuck about any of this, about choice prizes and column inches and blog. They were just a band making music, and somehow their album caught fire, and it was right at the right time for that kind of My Bloody Valentine shoegaze kind of thing to be on the upsurge and stuff like that. But they were there, and they just seemed like a band that were making music to make music, and they were going to grow. And I think they've maintained that. And a lot of the younger bands now seem to have a kind of, I think, a healthy enough wariness of the likes of me, or radio DJs, or all of this kind of stuff, where they're doing their thing, they're making their art, but they like to put it over here and a little bit away from the media in those terms. And I think as well, we're looking at an age in which, and again, I'm talking about music, but this is, it is what it is. But where art and music and sound and new songs are not found in conventional ways anymore. I think younger people, and even me as well, like, are finding music and finding new music aside from hype, aside from speculation, aside from everything else. Now, obviously, there are tiers with playlists and all of those types of things, but the avenues are greater and the doors are greater. I think hype is something that we should move away from, if we can. I don't think we should not get excited about music and talk about music. I love talking about music. I've said here before on the series that I think talking about music and listening to people's passion and thoughts about music is some of the most gratifying conversations you can have. But I think when we're talking about it in terms of this scale, and we're talking about it in terms of people and individuals, we have to be careful about what that does to the individual and where that leaves the person when our interests go other ways. Hype, is it necessary? Is it damaging? What does it do? Let me know in the comments below, or tweet me, or whatever you want to do. But yeah, I'd be interested to hear what you think about hype. And maybe you have been a victim of hype. Maybe you've seen it from the outside. But I think it's a conversation worth having. We have Julie Dawson and her debut solo album, Bottom of the Pool. And this is a record from, Julie Dawson of Newdad, vocalist, going out on her own for a record. And it's very interesting, this one, because, it's an interesting one for an artist such as Julie Dawson to be going out and making a record, whilst Newdad are also releasing records quite early into their run. But I think it's also an interesting one. There's kind of a mirror there between her and Grian Chatton, who from Fontaines, who also released a solo album in between records for his band. And before we get into the record itself and whether or not we like it and all these kind of types of things, and as I say, we're trying to look at albums differently from now on, outside of the kind of the normal review focus. But I think it's interesting to think about it in terms of artistic palettes, artistic colours, and the room to roam, as it were. And it's interesting in those ways that Julie Dawson has been given that room to roam and given a added artistic palette that she can draw from and create her own work. A lot of times we kind of see people in bands as unalloyed goods, that they are basically separate or are intertwined with the band that they're in, and never shall the two be separated until the band breaks apart. I think that's a very old-fashioned way of looking at things. I think the way that music is now and the way that music is created and the way that artist expression is looked down upon now, that it's perfectly within the realms of thinking that any musician from any band can go out, do their own thing, try something different that maybe they wouldn't be able to do or would not be of the same stuff when they do it with the group that they're normally in. As I say, we've referenced it a couple of times, that idea of there being more solo acts now because of the way that music is easier to write on a laptop and easier to try things out, and it's easier to record in those ways, and you don't need as much as the input as you used to have. So I don't look at this in any way of like, the old way I look at this would have been, the vocalist is going out on their own. They're doing they're doing a Morrissey, or they're doing a George Michael, or something like that. But it's more kind of looking at it as a way of that artist, and this is Julie Dawson in the sense of being able to create something a little bit different, not putting that on the band and turning around to the group Newdad and saying, this is the sound I want to go for, so we're making an album like this. And because it's more of a collaborative thing that may not be the direction that she sees and that the band themselves see themselves going in, but why then would she cast those ideas or cast those songs or cast those sounds away when she can make a record and make one she has with Bottom of the Pool? And I think it's incredibly texturally sophisticated, and it is very different. Well, it's obviously having the same kind of vocal timbre, same feel in certain respects. Obviously there's parts of Julie in there that would be in Newdad, but there's like this textural sophistication. There's these kind of layered electronic beats to it. The opening track, which is the title track, has this like minimalist electronic feel to it. It has that kind of very small, subtle arrangements within the electronic beats and stuff like that she uses to kind of weave the more gothic, the more jangled nature of her writing, and the kind of incredibly harmonically rich vocalization that she does within the music. And it feels quite intimate in moments. You would be forgiven for going for this and going, oh well, it's kind of got that bedroom pop feel, and it doesn't. It's quite different in those ways. That a song like Bottom of the Pool may have that feeling, but if you go towards Silly Little Song, which is one of the pre-releases on this, it's this huge, ambitious, cacophonous thing that is quite far-reaching and grand and wide in scale, and you're just like, oh, this is big, this is a big song. There's big ambitions within this. This isn't just a small, intimate album. Nothing wrong with that. But there's a lot of, as I say, textural sophistication within the record, going from Bottom of the Pool, this electronic minimalist thing, to the kind of the bigger, kind of grandiose feel of Silly Little Song, and then even to songs like Ripples, which have, again, that like hint of 90s alt-rock, Smashing Pumpkins jangle to it, with a little bit of gothic lyricism, gothic vocalization to it. There's a lot of different shapes being made within the sonic milieu of the record, and I think she holds it all really together. Nothing comes out at you and goes, oh, where did that come from? You kind of feel it's always rumbling underneath, and feels like a very sculptured, a very carefully crafted thing from Julie. I don't know how long it took her to make the record. I don't know. This could have been a whim, or this could be something she's working on for years. I don't know. But I think in those terms, it is a record that feels like it has so many layers to it. And it's so mature in what it tries to do. There's moments in it, and yeah, you would have that kind of Tracy Thorn kind of vocal to it that you're going, oh, this is just... I think that's one of the things as well that really got me with this record, is that the claustrophobic sometimes nature and kind of texturization of shoegaze, of which that is the type of genre and that is the kind of the feel of that music. This one leaves a lot for Julie's voice to kind of fill out the sonic palette a little bit more, because when you're making a record yourself, you can make those decisions to kind of have yourself a little bit more central, to use your voice in those ways. There, you can take things in, take things out, leave things minimal, make things grand. And I think she does such a great job on this. I think you look at the very final track, which is this incredibly cacophonous, almost aggressive sounding thing. And again, it sweeps it way beyond this kind of like, oh, it's an intimate record, maybe made by somebody on the road, and, kind of a side project type thing, and into something of its own making, of its own stuff. And it just came out like last week as well. And I would implore anyone who's a fan of Newdad, who's a fan of this genre of music, to really go out and check this record out and really give it the time, because I think it is really beautifully made, and beautifully produced as well. And ATF, one of the songs as well, is this just reverb soaked kind of feel to it. And I say there are moments of the Smashing Pumpkins, the Tracy Thorn to it, more kind of modern elements to it as well. She does a great job of kind of engaging the listener into the world of this record. And it feels like a finely crafted thing, in which that she can kind of format her music and format her taste. So I think, yeah, it's definitely a record worth going out and checking out. I think it's probably low key one of the kind of the slow burn records of the year. I wouldn't be surprised. And again, these things don't matter, but they do matter, and whatever, blah blah blah. You could see this on a Choice Prize list for album of the year as well, because it's such a little slow burn of a record, and so worth your time, and so it's not understated, because there are real moments of like swing for the fences ambition, which I love about it. And again, it's great that we're in a world now where artists can go out and make things on their own, or make things as part of groups and make things, and it's not a thing. It's not a drama. It's not a, oh my God, la 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 la. It's just, I want to do this, and I can do this, and I have the tools at my hands to do it. And yeah, I think it's a great record, and I hope people don't sleep on it. It's Julie Dawson. It's Bottom of the Pool. It is out now, and you can listen to it wherever you want to listen to your records, or buy it however you want to buy it, or engage with Julie's music however you want to. But if you're a fan of Newdad, or if you're a fan of this kind of genre in general, do check it out. It's well worth your time. Julie Dawson, Bottom of the Pool. Yes, dear listener, they seek him here, they seek him there, those musos seek him everywhere. Is he in heaven, or is he at the disco? The damned elusive Count of Monte playlisto. Yes, dear listener, the style and profile, limousine riding, jet flying, playlist making son of a gun has once again returned to the shores of Playlistia to bring you another beautiful bounty in the form of TLMT's Irish mixtape on Spotify. Let us delve into this week's picks, starting off with Big Love and their brand new single, Never Enough. A dramatically charged meeting of musicality and deft songwriting with this one. And yes, this is one of the bands that are really up and coming with a couple of singles so far this year that have really, or so far in their career, that have really hit it off with people. And you can definitely see why. There's drama, there's depth to their music. The music seems to serve the song, serve the lyricism. The performances do likewise. And it all culminates in what is a great sound and a big music, kind of in the traditional sense of it. There is that kind of feeling of the big music, which you could kind of push back to bands like maybe the Waterboys and stuff like that, where there's big sounds going on, a lot of musicality, great songs at the center of it. And yeah, Big Love are one of those bands that are doing that. And I have to say, it's another great release from them as they continue to climb up in everyone's estimation. So yes, Big Love, check it out. Never Enough is the new single. It's on the playlist. Do have a listener wherever you want to listen. Again, I'm not the boss of you. These are all just suggestions. You can listen to what you want. I'm not making you do anything. Next up, though, we have Susan O'Neill, taken from her brand new album, Now in a Minute. The song is called Bright Eyes, and it's an atmospherically layered song that above the kind of pops and clicks of kind of reverberation and beats and stuff like that, resonates Susan O'Neill's incredible depth with harmony and vocal layering and knowing when to punctuate that, knowing when to bring it in, and also quite a soulful voice that she has and brings to it. It's interesting to see Susan's not a sonic sea change, but kind of going out on her own, obviously she made kind of records with Mick Flannery and stuff like that, but making record herself that has that kind of monochromatic feel to it, that has something that is a bit more jagged, has a bit more edge to it, and really speaks to her and her strengths as a musician and as a songwriter, and painting that music across what is a incredibly depthful and, as I say, atmospherically led record with Now in a Minute and this track, Bright Eyes, which I think best encapsulates the record and what she does and how she creates interests in moods and interests in drives and interests in kind of those jagged edges. But yeah, Susan O'Neill, Bright Eyes from the album Now in a Minute. Check out the song, check out the album as well. It's definitely worth a listen to. And that's from her. It's on the playlist. Check it out. Next up, we have The Kates and their brand new single, Unbalancing, from the EP Pictures Here of Dreams, and it's an EP. And I do love, dear listener, a great opening track. And this is a great opening track from these guys as well. And they've been featured here before on the mixtape, and the Count of Monte playlist has chosen them in the past, and I have chosen them again with a great opening track, this one. And I just love this type of music. It has a real drive to it, has a real forward motion to it. It feels like there's a great musicality to it. It has bits of, I say, kind of the more I want to say the kind of the more up tempo of Sharon Van Etten's kind of work, but it has that kind of indie kind of pop kind of feel to it as well. They really sound like a band that have just like, to me at least, I'm sure they'll be like, we've been doing this for ages, but to me, they seem like a band that just appeared and are just like, we are amazing at this. We know exactly how to meld hooks and melodies and all these real cool indie gem things into songs and craft them, and here we are, and we're really cool. And as I say, I love a good opening song, so Unbalancing really kind of fixes into that and really gets into it. And yeah, we were talking about hype at the start, so we won't hype them up, but I think they're going to be one of the greatest bands of all time. No. They are really cool. So do check them out. They are just made for these kind of like indie playlists that I would be recommended to me and stuff like that. So hopefully they get on all those, and they get loads of ears on their music, because it's very well worth listening to. They're on the playlist. Check it out, or check them out, or go see them live, or whatever. I don't know. They must have some live dates coming up. They're very cool though. So do check them out. Next up though, number 4 in the picks this week, Post Last. Mizzen from the EP of the same name, Mizzen. And this is kind of a duo with kind of a jagged, it's a meeting of kind of jagged kind of moods and jagged elements with kind of shimmering elements as well in the guitars, which also themselves have jagged elements. So it's a song of great contrasts. It finds those nice contrasts within kind of the jagged and the glistening and the shimmering, and there's kind of sweetness to it, but there's an edge to it, and I really like that. I really like what they're doing. They've really found something in which it grabs the listener, it grabs the interest, it is welcoming to listen to, but also challenging in other elements, and it's hard to do that. It's hard to find those connections, but find that they have on this song. And the EP is also very much worth your time and worth listening to. But Mizzen is the title track from it, and I think it best encapsulates what they're trying to do. It's a really good opening salvo from them, and very interesting too as well. So yeah, Post Last, Mizzen from the EP Mizzen. It's on the playlist. Check it out. And finalement, the finale itself, Junior Brother with Take Guilt, brand new single from Junior Brother. Needs very little introduction if you're listening to this podcast, but you might want to know. This might be your first time listening to Junior Brother. Yeah, and it captures once again what is great about Junior Brother, which is raw performance, a kind of idiosyncrasy that weaves itself around the kind of loose-hanging, jolted folk that he does, and great long passages of lyricism, and that's something that the great folk artists have always been able to do is have a voice that is not perfect, have a way of delivering it that is more interesting than perfect, and have long passages of lyricism that engage the listener. Obviously, the big one, and I'm not comparing in any way, but the big person when you talk about things like that is obviously Bob Dylan. He was amazing at it, and Junior Brother has some of that in it, which is this kind of rolling, tumbling. The song could go on for 16 minutes or 4 minutes or 5 minutes, but this is a great song. And it's, again, the raw performance, the jagged jolts within it. It feels like a song that just bounces and jumps and follows his way and punctuates when it needs to. And there's a kind of an unpredictability to his performance and way of singing and way of delivering music that really resonates with me, and I think it really resonates with the listener. Take Guilt, another great song by Junior Brother. Do check it out. Those are the picks, though, this week from the Count of Monte playlist. Though, but fear not, dear listener and dear viewer who is watching on the YouTubes, or you're listening on the Spotify's or the Apples or whatever way that you listen. That is it from the Count of Monte playlist this week, but I shall pick more tracks, or I shall pick more tracks next week for the Irish mixtape. But you can listen to all that cool music there, or however you want to listen to music. You want to listen to music whatever way you see fit. But that's it for the Count of Monte playlist this week. I shall return. Goes, and there it went. But before I go, thank you for listening and watching the Last Mixtape podcast here on Spotify, on Apple, and on YouTube. If you could like, subscribe, comment, and do all the stuff that helps the podcast grow, I'd be forever grateful. And you can also contact me here, Stephen at thelastmixtape.com, with any of your thoughts or suggestions, or if you have new music for the Count of Monte playlist, who is very definitely a different person from me, I'll be sure to send them on. But for now, that was the Last Mixtape podcast. You're the listener. I was Stephen White. Hey, so long.